Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode here today. I'm so incredibly excited to have a fellow colleague and dear friend, Dr. Sabrina Solt, here. We're going to dive into two major topics today that are very important for people to understand. Sabrina is the peptide queen. That's what I call her. And she's the GLP-1 queen of microdosing. She's the one that taught me about microdosing, and she just teaches me so much stuff. And I love going to dinner and have a 12-ounce ribeye steak in front of us, and we just talk about health. Yes, that, and then we go to home and we go to bed by 8:30, 9 p.m. That's our jam. That's part of the wellness field sometimes. Anyway, welcome, Sabrina. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much for, having me back. This is round 2 for us.
Yes, and there's gonna be more. I can already tell you that.
Yeah. Perfect.
So I well, first of all, tell the listeners a little bit more about your practice so they have an understanding. Because I posted that peptide video and I did have someone go, how can I work with her? And I sent her your website. So I want people to know.
Okay, so I'm located in Scottsdale. That's where my brick and mortar practices. And I am a licensed naturopathic doctor, but I'm only licensed in Arizona and California.
Okay.
So I'm really only able to work with people in those states in my fullest capacity, meaning we can actually prescribe peptides should we decide to use them. There are certain ways around that for people who might be out of state, but they actually would have to travel here to kind of establish care in person. It just becomes a little bit trickier, but if not impossible. But that's kind of how people can work with me. And then, of course, I am on social media and I do share a lot on there about peptides and all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah. And you do have a lot of clients that fly here. You even have clients from out of the country that fly here to work with you, right?
Yep, we do. We get people that come in because they want to do, health overhauls with us. We also have people come and do stem cell therapy with us. And yeah, we've had patients from all over the US as well as out of the country.
Yeah. Stem cell is one of the things that we talked about quite a bit the last time when you were on, and we'll probably do another deep dive another time. But today we're going to, really focus in on GLP-1s and peptides. We're going to do the first part of the podcast on GLP-1s. And the reason I wanted to do this is because GLP-1s are here. They're here. People are using them. And I think that what I'm seeing is so many people are using them in the wrong way. You and I both see that. There's a safe and effective way to do and there's a right time and a right place, I believe, to do that as well. And so I wanted to bring you in and just take a really big deep dive into this and also like what you're seeing with them. So have at it.
Oh gosh. Okay, where to start? I mean, yes. So there's other providers that are listening to this right now. I was actually just at a stem cell conference 2 weekends ago speaking, and I was speaking to a room full of doctors who do stem cell therapy on how to properly utilize these with their patients because, like you said, they're not going anywhere. And right now, patients are looking for them, and you want them to be doing them in a way that is, like you're saying, safe and effective. And in my experience, I started using these peptides like semaglutide and Tirzepatide back in 2021. So I've had about 4 years of experience prescribing these for patients, and I was doing them mainly, like, on the down low.
Yeah.
And the very first patient that I used it with, it was this lady, and she had been a patient of mine since probably 2016, and we had done all the things. We had put her on hormones, we had done the previous weight loss pills, like the phentermine, we've tried HCG. We did everything we could to try to get this woman to lose weight. She wasn't losing weight. And I was like, you know what? There's these peptides out there. And I think that the starting dose might be too high because she wasn't pre diabetic, she wasn't diabetic. And so I was like, you know what? Let's just try like a really low dose of this and see if we can't get your weight to budge. And we did it and it worked. And after that, I was like, okay, let's like continue experimenting with this. And so I had, of course, there's so many patients that fall into this category. And without completely generalizing it, I would say it's a lot of middle-aged women who are postmenopausal who put on what we call that middle-aged middle, and they haven't been able to lose it despite their best efforts with diet, exercise, hormone balancing. And so that was a population that I really kind of started using this in. And once they started getting results, they would tell their friends, and it just kind of became this like under the table thing that nobody was really talking about, but I was doing kind of behind the scenes, and it was working. And then, it started to get a lot of really great traction over this past year, this whole idea of microdosing. And it's actually, I credit one of my friends, Dr. Tina Moore, for making it really popular on social media.
Yeah.
That woman is not afraid to speak out and speak the truth about things. And she just really put a lot of great information together. And even though she took a lot of flack for it, people called her like a shill for big pharma. It was a whole thing. It really did start educating people. And so now, kind of circling back to what I was saying, people know about it. It's out there. It has become social media famous. Patients are wanting it. Patients are asking for it. And so I think our job as the provider now is to make sure that we are doing it in a way that is that's safe and effective for everyone.
Yeah. I just want to pull this back a little bit. I want you guys to understand one thing. Sabrina was actually one of the first people to experiment with microdosing and found how effective it can be. Now, I want to talk a little bit about microdosing. And when she's talking about peptides, she's also talking about GLP-1s because people get it mixed up. So I want you to understand that it's actually a peptide. And then there's all like these different ones. A lot of people are doing it wrong. And I've seen some very bad things happen with people doing them. Microdosing is, some people are doing wrong microdosing as well, because I had a gal that I was working with, and her mom, I actually had done work with her mom too. And then her mom ended up later on, she went to a company online where they prescribe, Tirzepatide, and they shipped it to her, and they said they're microdosing. And I asked her what and then her daughter told me, like, hey, she got really sick. And I was like, what dose did they start her at? I think you're going to be like, holy crap, that's what dose they started her at. So they started her at a dose that I would have never even thought about starting her at. And she got so sick. And they called it microdosing. And then a month later, even though she was being sick, they doubled it. And I was like, what? So anyway, so her daughter ended up getting Tirzepatide too, but instead of following their orders of like, because they started her daughter the same dosage as they did her mom. And I was like, we're not doing that. So she started what you taught me.
Yeah. And that's such an important thing. So the dosage, in my opinion, that a lot of people are being started on for weight loss specifically is far too high, especially if you don't need it, right? And that's where we can get the side effects that you hear about in the news where people are getting, they're saying like there's stomach paralysis, possible thyroid involvement, other issues. And it's again, it's to me, it's being used incorrectly. When I talk about microdosing, a lot of the times the starting doses for these are in milligrams, 2.5 milligrams, stuff like that, 5 milligrams, 1 milligram, whatever it is. When I'm working with patients, it depends on the patient. I'm not here to give dosing advice 'cause
No.
it's very bio individual, but we'll start with microgram dosing. So extremely, extremely low. So microgram, literally microdosing. But not only that, sometimes we even play around with the frequency of dosing, meaning we have to take into consideration like the half-life of these medications. So one half-life is roughly 5 days for these GLP-1 medications, meaning after 5 days, it's out of your system by about half. The general consensus is that after about 5 half-lives, something is completely out of your system.
Okay.
So this is a part of the conversation that I actually don't see anybody else really talking about, in that if you're dosing every single week, you're actually consistently increasing that microdose over time to the point where it may hit a lot higher therapeutic levels. And so people can actually get more side effects the longer that they're on it, because you continually raise the baseline GLP levels in the system. Sometimes I'll even have patients dose every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks so that we make sure we're keeping it lower longer. If that makes sense.
Interesting. So even though it has a 5-day, let's call it shelf life.
Half-life, yeah.
Yeah, half life. So if it's 5 days, and let's say someone is consistently every Sunday is their day to give them the injection. So that's a 7-day span. How
That means the original dose was only decreased by maybe half. So let's just say for numbers' sake that they were taking 1 milligram. After a week, it might be in their system to half a milligram, but
Okay, got it.
now you just added another one. So
Got
now we're at 1.5. In a week, half of the first one's gonna be gone again, but then only half of that second one. And so we're consistently getting this stepwise increase. And so this is why, like, some people, they'll be fine initially, but they'll also may get side effects down the road. And one of the biggest things that I actually see with this, I wouldn't say biggest things, but one of the most interesting things that I've seen is actually patients develop something called anhedonia, which is this phenomenon where they actually start to get progressively disinterested in things that bring them pleasure, which can be good for certain things because we can actually see people resolve addictions. I've seen people resolve addictions to alcohol, to cocaine, to gambling, to porn, and even to cheese.
Yep.
So across the board, it's a really cool benefit. And of course, like overeating, binge eating, things like that. But when it becomes too high, like if you're dosing too frequently, you actually can lose just like your zest for life too. So we
Yeah, it's the dopamine, like it kind of takes your dopamine away.
Yep.
Full disclosure before we dive in, even it, because I've never actually, I don't think I've ever talked about this on here, but full disclosure to anybody that's listening here. So I worked with Sabrina towards the end of last year, and I had extremely high cortisol levels, and my Hashimoto's antibody levels were really, really high. My inflammation was just like, it wasn't good. And so because of that, I said, you know what? Let me try a micro dose of tirzepatide because it's not sometimes on day one I can tell it suppresses my appetite just a tiny bit, but it's different. Like that, those are some things that you taught me. And the reason that I did that is because number one, I'm not gonna, educate and tell people about something that I haven't like done myself. So I wanted to also experiment with that myself to see what does it do for me. And then it's in the market, like we said, if I have clients that are like, hey, I would like to try this, I have a lot more knowledge behind that. So full disclosure, I have been taking a micro dose of tirzepatide since December, and I will tell you, it has changed my life. Like I didn't go on it for weight loss. I may have lost like, I don't know, 5 pounds or something like that. But the main thing that it did is I noticed such a huge decrease in my inflammation. And I was actually able to like put my clothes on again and not feel like they're like annoying me because that inflammation was gone. So that was a huge, huge thing. And now talking about the dopamine stuff, I did use a dopamine booster to help me with that because I did notice, and that was probably because of thyroid and cortisol issues as well. Like I needed to really like my prolactin levels were insane.
Yeah.
So those are all the things to know and consider. So the reason I wanted to have her come on here and talk about these things too is because of my own experience with it. And now I'm seeing some of these things with my clients as well. And so, what I want to talk about next is the different types of GLP-1s. And I want you to do a little bit of education on some of the top ones so that people understand that.
Yeah, there's 2 main ones on the market right now. There is a third, and it's kind of just coming out. It doesn't have, like, full approval, but we have the generic names, and then you also have the brand names. So, you have semaglutide, and that one also goes by Ozempic, and then you have the tirzepatide, that one also goes by Mounjaro, and then the third one is the retatrutide, and I don't know if that one has a brand name at this point in time. If they do, I can't think of it, but they're actually vary slightly from one another. And I will say there are some patients that don't tolerate one and they'll tolerate another. Some people do come up resistant to some, and some people have more exaggerated responses to one versus the other. And sometimes we have to experiment. I will say that for my patients that are looking more for the alternative results, like the inflammation reduction and whatnot, versus just like the fat loss and blood sugar management, we tend more towards the tirzepatide just because it does have, like in my experience, it has worked better for that.
Yeah.
Whereas my patients that are definitely more on the prediabetes, diabetes, metabolic syndrome side, I will tend to start with the semaglutide with them because they really do need more of that just stronger glucose management. And it tends to work really well with that. And then the semaglutide, in my experience, most of those patients actually get significant appetite suppression.
Yeah.
My patients on the tirzepatide, it's not as severe. So people like you who don't necessarily have a lot of weight to lose, maybe just a little bit of extra fat like we all have, and you want more of the inflammation to come down, their tirzepatide isn't going to do that as intensely. So you still have the ability to eat. But I find that my patients, when we use the semaglutide, that one is really the appetite suppressor, even at
Yeah.
extremely micro doses. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So what about if someone's on semaglutide and it's a much more of an appetite suppressor? how are they getting their calories in?
And this is a tricky thing that I see in the regular world right now, and where we start to see a lot of patients who start losing muscle mass and bone density. And this is, again, why another reason why I love the low dosing and the microdosing, because we still want the person eating, because ultimately we still have to nourish our body. We still need adequate protein coming in, adequate micronutrients. And if a patient is not doing that, like I was saying, you do run the risk of muscle loss, and people will see this glorified in the headlines. They'll lose weight, most of it will come from muscle. And this, I think, has to be backtracked to an understanding of how the body actually utilizes fuel. So we can burn fuel, we can get energy through either burning glucose, getting sugars in. So that's going to come in the form of carbohydrates into our diet. Or you can be a fat burner, and you can be in ketosis and using ketones, and you can be eating up more of a high fat ketogenic diet and processing energy that way. I do find that patients that are more on the prediabetes, insulin resistance side have a really hard time utilizing fat for fuel, meaning they can't get into ketosis as readily as somebody who doesn't have a damaged metabolism already. So in these patients, it becomes even more critical to manage their diet. And a lot of well-meaning doctors, well-meaning providers will say, oh, you have to go low carb, you have to go high fat, you have to try to do keto while you're on these. And in my experience, that's actually more detrimental to them, because here's the thing. If they can only burn glucose for fuel and they're just eating fat, where is this glucose coming from? And the answer is it's coming from their own muscle, because what the body will do is it will take that muscle, that protein, it'll go through a process called gluconeogenesis in order to turn that muscle into sugar for the body to use for energy. So this is in where working with a provider who gets it makes sense, because if you fall into that category and you go low carb, you will lose your lean muscle mass. You will eat away at your bone density. You almost have to be on what I will call a smartly managed not carbohydrate rich diet, but carb fueled diet in order to actually get your metabolism correct. And then once we get you out of prediabetes, once we get you out of insulin resistance, once we get your hormones managed, then we can start experimenting with getting you more up into a ketogenic diet, getting that more metabolic flexibility in there. But right off the bat, I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah. And I experiment with things. I mean, I know you do too, but I experiment with things like on myself all the time. When I consistently get my workouts in, my strength training workouts, and I make sure I'm getting good protein and good fat in, like I I don't have any issues, like my appetite doesn't go away. But it's when I'm not moving enough, that's when I notice it actually affects my appetite more. So I want you guys to understand this. When you're moving your body and you're exercising, you're boosting your metabolism. That is a metabolism feeder. It will also, so if you have dopamine issues where, this is affecting your dopamines, the exercise will help combat that as well. So Sabrina and I have talked about this before. If you're going to be doing something like this and you're going to take a Tirzepatide, GLP-1, peptide, whatever it is, you got to do the groundwork. This is not a magic pill. This is not the magic easy way out. Some people think it is, but if you're not doing the groundwork of the foundational things, it's going to come bite you big time.
Yeah, 100%. And I do have this conversation with my patients at least. And thankfully, a lot of the patients that come to me, they understand who I am first. So they understand
Yeah.
that I'm a really big proponent of high protein diets, of working out, weight training. And so thankfully a lot of them are very much aligned in those values, and we don't have to have the hard conversations too often. But you're right. I mean, we have to be preserving muscle mass. Muscle is the organ of longevity. As far as ROI on your future health, if you do nothing but pack on some muscle on your body, you are going to age far better than anybody else. Yeah, that's my number one thing.
It literally is like we call it an organ now.
It is.
And it is the organ that you should be the most concerned about to keep healthy in terms of longevity. Because if you keep your muscle healthy, it will create this ripple effect of health into everything else. So, especially if you're someone that's going into perimenopause, postmenopause, like if you don't want to have osteopenia and osteoporosis and a whole wreck of things with your hormones, you have to make that a priority. So, think about prevention versus getting to a place where now you're fighting it and having to like it's this uphill battle to get yourself out of it. So I want to switch gears here a little bit and I want to talk more about some other types of peptides that are not the GLP-1s. One of the things that I'm noticing in just the last like 3 to 4 months is companies that are coming out with peptides that you just buy them in a pill and they're just marketing and selling them. So I want to get your kind of like feedback on them. How safe are they? I guess it depends on like what you're wanting from them as well. But in my head, because I did the thymosin alpha, I just don't trust it because I'm like, I don't know. I would rather do what I did.
So it's interesting. So there's a lot of companies right now
Yeah.
that are making peptides, and people will find them online, and they'll find them from these websites that will say like research only. And the difference is these peptides are being made in a lab versus an actual pharmacy. And where that becomes a concern to the consumer is that those labs aren't held to the same standard that a licensed pharmacy is, meaning they don't have to adhere to certain endotoxin testing or levels. They don't have to adhere to certain potency or purity levels. And of course, they could say anything that they want because all these websites are going to have a disclaimer on them that says, this is not for human consumption. It is illegal to consume as a human. So their hands are clean, right? People, of course, have every right to put what they want in their bodies and do whatever they want with their own bodies. I'm not saying that they have to do one thing, but I think it's kind of dangerous that many people are taking these things into their own hands without proper education. Because a lot of the time, these peptides, too, you're pushing pathways in the body. And unless you really have an understanding of the pathway that you're pushing, you can actually cause other issues. There's also limitations on how long you should run certain cycles. There's actually synergy that you can do with combining and stacking certain peptides together. And so for ultimately for a person to not waste their money, I do recommend making sure that you're working with somebody who can do this properly with you and then can prescribe it for you through an actual pharmacy where you can be guaranteed that the product that you're getting is the product that you're getting at the right concentration, at the right dosage, and free up things like endotoxins. When it comes to the difference between like injectables versus oral, there are some peptides that can't be delivered orally. They just won't be absorbed. The body will break it down through the stomach before it actually gets to be utilized because again, these peptides are just tiny sequences of amino acids. BPC 157 is one that can be taken orally, is generally available as a direct to consumer product. Fabulous peptide. I
Love
love
it.
that one. Love it. It's so
Yeah.
good. But beyond that one, there isn't a lot out there that I would say absolutely most people are going to be okay with it, that they should just do it direct to consumer. Like you were saying with the thymosin alpha 1, it's one of those ones, it's amazing. It's great for immune function. But dosing it appropriately is important, and making sure that you do a proper length of a cycle is important too. But it's very powerful when it's done right.
Yeah. And just to extend a little bit on that to give you guys an idea of what that actually looked like. So I was on thymosin alpha 1 for 8 weeks and it brought my Hashimoto's antibodies down from like 500 to in the 30s, which was like I've never seen that. I love that stuff. So anyway, we had this conversation and I asked her like, should I continue on? And she said, actually, we need to take a break. It's very important to take a break. And so I want you guys to understand that just because all of this stuff is so available for you to just go get and they're telling you these things. One of the things to know from a provider standpoint and what we see, there's other things to consider. So if you have thyroid issues going on and you have cortisol issues going on, let's just say your cortisol is way high, just to know that if you're taking something that is for weight loss, there are actually things that you can take and it will compete with your cortisol, so dive into that a little bit, Sabrina.
The cortisol conversation is so important anytime when we're pushing pathways in the body that are going to be more growth related. High cortisol, high stress levels do not actually support positive growth in the body because all it really cares about is keeping you alive.
Yep.
And a great example, we were kind of alluding to this earlier, is the connection between cortisol and dopamine. So a lot of people, and I'm sure your audience will probably, some might identify with this, you get into a high stress state and all of a sudden you feel paralyzed. You can't do anything. Your motivation's all down. And what's usually happening is your cortisol levels go so high, so consistently, you end up in this state where your adrenals are kind of giving out and your brain starts sending these cortisol signaling pathways. And one of the things that happens is the signaling actually gets mixed up with something called prolactin. It's another hormone. And prolactin is the hormone that promotes lactation. So it's supposed to be normal in women who are pregnant and breastfeeding.
Mhm.
Not normal for that to be high in somebody who's not doing those things. It is a sign that your cortisol has gone completely off the
You mean like
trail.
mine?
Yes, yes. But no, here's the interesting thing. As soon as prolactin starts going up, dopamine starts going down, which means dopamine is our hormone or our neurotransmitter, I should say, that is responsible for our motivation, our drive, our good moods, everything that makes us want to just like live life and have a zest for life. And when the prolactin's up because cortisol's up, your dopamine starts completely crashing. And this makes it hard to stick to a plan, let alone see positive changes from it. So sometimes with patients, we actually have to work on getting their stress levels under control before we can even move on to some of these other peptides, right? You can't pour from an empty cup, so to speak. So you start trying to push these pathways in somebody who is stressed to the brim, they're not going to get the results and it's likely going to be a waste of time and money.
Yeah. Just to give a little bit of a picture, what she just described is exactly what happened to me last year. So I had way high cortisol levels, and then we looked at prolactin, and prolactin was like, holy crap, I'm not lactating. There's no milk, but my prolactin levels were insanely high. What was crazy is that exact thing happened, and I thought it was connected to other things. And of course, there's emotional and psychological things. And I was going through a whole bunch of like really in depth, like personal, hey, we're getting down into the nitty gritty of the dirty, muddy waters. And I'm out of that now and it feels amazing. But what I noticed last year when I was in the thick of it, I couldn't do my normal strength training workouts because what would happen is I would go to the gym 20 minutes into my workout, I lost all zest. I couldn't finish it. I could feel like depression and anxiety coming in. And it wasn't until we addressed the cortisol and the prolactin and started rebuilding from there that that started to get better. But I had to allow myself to actually heal and get myself through that part before I could push myself. I was like, what is wrong with me? Is this what happens when you get close to 40? No, this is not what should be happening. It was just an internal thing that I needed to take a look at. So, yeah, she's not wrong. I experienced it. I lived it.
Yeah, it's actually more common than people would think, especially amongst high performing women, female entrepreneurs, just like women in general who are consistently burning the candle at both ends. Maybe they're, a working mom and they've got side projects and they've got their friendships and they've got the gym that they got to go to. Like there's just so much on their plate. And especially if they get to the middle age part where they're also trying to lose weight at the same time, they end up in this cycle where they're undernourishing themselves, so they're in some sort of calorie deficit while pushing and pushing and pushing themselves, and then all of a sudden they wake up one morning, they're like, "Wow, I'm 20 pounds overweight, I feel depressed, nothing's working, all the tricks that I used to do are completely out the window," and yet most of them will double down,
Yep.
and they'll try to keep going, and, as you've experienced, the answer to that is not to keep going down that road. It's actually to switch over to eating more and eating more of the right things and supporting the body with rest instead of pushing movement. And we kind of just have to completely like flip this narrative on its head because I think women in general have been told that, yes, you can do it all, you should do it all, and you should do it in a deficit and it's not working. And I feel like this kind of took a little tangent, but hey, if I had to have a soapbox of one thing, it would be like we need to get women nourished and healthy because that's what's going to actually change the world.
It is. It really is because that's really where it starts. Whether you're married or in a relationship, if that woman is not nourished and healed, the relationship's struggling.
The trickle down into parenting, the trickle down into how she shows up with her friends, with her work, with literally everything she does. And like women deserve better than that because we do hold it all together and we can do it for a very long time. I mean, I've had women who they show up to my office at the end of a decade of running like that. And they're finally like, yeah, I should probably take some time for me. And I'm like, honey, the time to take time for you was 10 years ago. But hey, second best time is right now. And thankfully we can fix it. But it does take a great deal of intentional work.
Yeah. Well, one thing to understand, like in the world that we live in now, you're right. Like we're both entrepreneurs, we're business builders, we get shit done, and that we're wired like that. But at the end of the day, we've had this conversation before. We also both know that that's not the natural DNA makeup of the woman. And so I've said this to people before, like I was married for 10 years. And so like that's who I was in the marriage. And then but at the end of the day, I also felt like I needed to be that in the marriage, which completely let me into burnout. And now I'm like, if I ever get into a relationship or if I ever get married again, that I'm never going to do that again. Like I will do what I need to do at work. I will get stuff done. But when I get home, take care of me, baby. I don't want to do anything else.
Well, and I feel like, you and I are on similar journeys because I was also married for just about 9 years and divorced as well. And I have never had such low stress as I do being a single mom. So it's kind of backwards, but when you think about it, I was already doing all of the things, except now I just have one less piece of stress in my life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. Anything else that you want to share with the listeners that you feel like is important for them to know?
especially when it comes to just the peptides in general, just I have to emphasize just safety first
Yeah.
all day long. Because yes, they are peptides. Yes, most of them are safe, but I'll just tell you as a cautionary tale from me personally. So there's a class of peptides called growth hormone releasing peptides. Growth hormone is phenomenal. It's going to give you better hair, better skin, better nails. It's going to help smooth fine lines and wrinkles. It's going to get you better deep sleep. It's going to help burn some fat. It's going to help put on muscle. Like I could go on. Growth hormone is fantastic. And I would say probably 2021 was the last time that I had tried this one particular growth hormone releasing peptide. And at that time, I was like, ooh, it didn't quite feel right. I had like a really bad injection site reaction to it. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm just not going to touch this one. I recently went to go try it again just a couple weeks ago, injected it. And when I tell you, I felt my throat closing, my entire body got red and hot. I was like, oh, this is it. This is how it ends. Thankfully, got it to resolve. I had some Benadryl on hand, but it was scary. So even though, again, these peptides are generally safe, there is the potential that you can have an allergic response to them. There is another peptide in that class that I can do that I'm not allergic to, but I was trying to go for the stronger one, try to get even more results. But it doesn't work for me. It just doesn't work for me. So just again, caution.
Yeah. And that's something that she taught me is especially with growth hormone and the benefits of doing growth hormone. Again, if you're going to do it, you have to do it for the right reasons. Number two, going back to cortisol and thyroid, if those two are competing, growth hormone's not going to work. So you're wasting your money. The reason I wanted to have this conversation is precautionary. Like if you're going to be doing these things, make sure you're educated on them. And then make your decisions from there. And if you're working with a provider, make sure you trust, what that provider is bringing to the table. And then go from there. And you can always, reach out to Sabrina. What's your IG handle?
I'm just at Dr. Solt on Instagram, DRSOLT. Definitely the place that I'm most active. And then my clinic's website is stemcelltherapypro.com. And that's where people can sign up for a call with my team to see if working together is a good fit.
Awesome. And it's Arizona and California.
That is where I'm licensed. Yeah.
Unless you want to fly to Arizona to see her. That is another option. So thank you for coming on here and sharing your wealth of knowledge. It was a phenomenal conversation. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Lizzie Young Show. If you're ready to take the next step to transforming your health and life, visit www.undietyou.com for all my resources and to book your consultation today. Don't forget to subscribe and join me each week for more tips, inspiration, and conversations with phenomenal guests to help you feel your best. see you guys next week.